Hello and welcome. Thanks for joining us at Brownsville PUB at Work. My name is Alicia Warner. I'm the Communications and Public Relations Coordinator for Brownsville PUB. We never really think about where our water comes from. Today we will be thinking about our brackish water treatment center, which is called the Southmost Regional Water Authority, and it's located in northeast Brownsville. Here to tell us a little bit more about our water treatment site is Judy Adams. Judy is the manager of water and wastewater for Brownsville PUB.
Well, thank you.
Thank you for coming, Judy. Judy, can you tell us a little bit about the Southmost Regional Water Authority?
Well, the Southmost Regional Water Authority, which we also call the SRWA, is a brackish groundwater treatment facility. We treat 7.5 million gallons a day. We provide it for 5 different entities, not only for the city of Brownsville, but also for Brownsville Navigation District, City of Los Fresnos, Indian Lake, and Valley Mud. So this particular plant is unique. It uses state-of-the-art reverse osmosis membrane treatment to provide bottled quality water for the entities.
Okay. Well, you mentioned some of the entities. Can you give us a rundown of what the entities do and who they are?
Yeah. Well, like I said, Brownsville Public Utilities Board is a majority owner. They own 92.91% of the Southmost Regional Water Authority. But there's other entities that were involved, and this was a unique project in that it was a regional approach to solving some of our water issues or water supply issues. City of Los Fresnos again, Town of Indian Lake, Brownsville Navigation District, and Valley Municipal Utility District. These are the 5 entities that participated in this particular project. Laguna Madre Water Supply, or Water District, is another entity that is part of the Southmost Regional Water Authority, but they didn't participate in this project.
Okay. And so why did the SRWA come about? I'm going to call it the SRWA because it's shorter, and we all know that it means Southmost Regional Water Authority.
Well, just a little history about SRWA. The Texas legislature enacted the SRWA in 1981, and it's supposed to be a government entity that can provide regional water planning. Technically, the SRWA is a conservation and water reclamation district, but the sole purpose of the SRWA is for water planning. Well, in the 80s and the 90s, SRWA remained dormant for most of that period. And if you recall, the late 90s, there was a water drought, and so there was a regional concern about whether or not there was enough river water or water supply to provide for the citizens of South Texas. And so the Water Authority, the entities that participated in the SRWA, got together and considered alternate water supply, water supplies. And so one of the things that we were looking at was groundwater. Unfortunately, the groundwater that we have in South Texas is very salty, and so they did a study to see if it would be possible to take the groundwater that we have in South Texas, which is very salty, and just remove the salt and turn it into drinking water. And so in 2000, they revived the SRWA. They met through a series of meetings and agreements. They decided to go ahead and go forward with this technology, the reverse osmosis treatment technology, and built this plant, and it's been a real big success for those entities.
Yeah, back in the 80s and 90s, I know that Brownsville PUB, I've heard the stories. I wasn't around back then, but I mean, I was alive, but I wasn't there back then. I know that they were doing a lot of water conservation for property owners. People were having to only water their lawns on certain times. Can you tell us a little bit about that? That way we can give our audience a little bit clearer picture of what that period meant to homeowners.
Well, there was there was a lot of water planning going on. There was all the way from Laredo all the way down to Brownsville, trying to figure out what different approaches we could use to try to conserve water. But the problem was the two reservoirs, or the off-channel reservoirs that we have on the river, which serve South Texas, which are Amistad Lake and Falcon Lake, the two large reservoirs on the river. And the problem was that those reservoirs were already down below 20%. So a normal conservation capacity is about 100%. So the lakes are down to 20%, which is significant. And so it wasn't enough of conserving water at that point, because there wasn't enough water to conserve. And that was kind of the scary point, I guess, because one of the things that they were looking at seriously was cutting off farming or irrigation water. And as you know, farming is very important to the region, and so that would be a drastic measure. And so we had to look at what our options were and what's the best solution to providing water for the South Texas without, at least trying to maintain or keep water flowing in the river for our farmers. So.
Well, that's really a good point that you made, as far as, you can't cut out your lifeblood, which is farming. And in this region, back then, it was very heavy farming. And when you do that, it cuts off the lifeblood of the community. So I guess community had its back up against the wall as far as not having any water. And so they started trying to think out of the box, and they're looking at all possible future water sources. And I know Brownsville PUB's always been had a lot of forethought as far as planning and things like that. Can you tell us how the plant started to be built after the planning?
Well, we first started with a feasibility study. This is a groundwater feasibility study, just to make sure there was going to be enough groundwater without impacting the area. So we did that, and the study that was done, it was a hydrologic study, or hydrologic study. And the professionals that performed the study actually showed that there was enough groundwater that it could supply this plant for 30 years. And so that's the first thing that they had to do. And then the second thing they did was, once they figured out how they were, where they were going to use the water, the next step was, what technology were they going to use to treat the water. And that's where they considered various options, and they chose the reverse osmosis treatment process. And this is the same process that bottled water companies use. When you go to your stores and you buy bottled water, they use, many times, unless it's natural spring water, they'll use reverse osmosis treatment to treat the water to a very high quality. And that's why we say that we have bottled quality water here at SRWA. So they decided on the technology, and then it was a matter of getting the agreements together, and here we are.
Okay. Can you walk us through the reverse osmosis process?
Yeah. We have some membranes. Basically, reverse osmosis is a semi-permeable membrane that's wrapped around and spiraled into a vessel, and then the water is under pressure, under high pressure, is forced through this semi-permeable membrane. You can just imagine that there's a sheet, so to speak, with lots of very tiny pores, and so this water is forced through this semi-permeable membrane, and what comes out on the other side is ultra clean water. So what gets rejected, or what is held back, are any kind of minerals or metals or any kind of pollutants that we really don't want in the water. This is fairly new technology. It's been around since the 1950s, but just probably in the 80s, 90s, it really started to take hold as far as industry started using it to purify the water. And then really just recently, municipalities started considering it for water treatment on a really big scale.
That's important. I'm glad you mentioned that. How many people actually does the SRWA serve?
Well, SRWA averages about 6 million gallons a day. And they provide water to 25% of Brownsville's population. So that's about 40 to 50,000 people in Brownsville.
We were talking about membranes. How expensive are the membranes, and how much money does it cost to treat, say, a gallon of water?
Well, I don't have the exact figure for the unit cost of treating water, although I can say it's very comparable to conventional treatment. And what we've seen in the industry is desalination. The cost of desalinated water is definitely going down, whereas conventional treatment processes are actually going up. And so we're not quite there, but we're thinking that at some point this reverse osmosis treatment will actually be similar to or less than conventional treatment.
Wow, so the costs are starting to even out?
Definitely.
Okay.
One of the things that we saw, or one of the savings that we were able to capitalize on, is when we built this plant, you know, we used groundwater as our source of water, but water rights are, for the Rio Grande, have already been allocated. You would have to go to the market to buy water rights, and they're fairly expensive. And so one of the things that this plant was able to do was save money by not having to purchase those water rights out on the market. So that was a savings. And so when you consider the savings from having to purchase water rights, it's very comparable to surface water treatment.
Okay. Judy, we were talking about brackish water, and that's a kind of water that SRWA treats. What exactly does brackish mean?
Brackish water is somewhere between fresh water and seawater. Salt in drinking water is usually measured as the total dissolved solids, or TDS. Without getting too technical, fresh water, the drinking water standard for fresh water, drinking water has to be less than 1,000 parts per million total dissolved solids. And so the SRWA, the brackish water, is about 3 times what fresh water is allowed to be, and then seawater is like 10 times more. So brackish water just means it's saltier than fresh water, but not as salty as seawater.
Okay, so you get all this brackish water from where? I know there's some wells.
Right, we have 20 groundwater wells. The wells go about 250 feet down, 250 to 350. We've got 20 of them, and they're scattered just west of Brownsville, and they go pull the water up and deliver it 6 or 7 miles away to this plant, and we treat it with reverse osmosis. I had mentioned that the reverse osmosis treatment process provides a water quality that was very clean, and so we do have to do a special treatment to the water before we can actually send it out into the pipes. The water is so clean that it's considered aggressive. You wouldn't want to use valves or metal, anything that's metal, with this water, and so what we have to do is before we can send it out into the pipes, we have to actually chemically stabilize that water. So we add a calcium chloride, and we also add an alkalinity to this water, and this is basically adding the minerals back into the water so that it's stable before it gets delivered to people's homes.
I need to ask you, I know this is a very special plant because it is breaking ground in the state of Texas and in the nation for being such a special treatment plant. Can you give us some information on that, and let us just let us know how special this plant is?
Okay. Well, there's a couple things I think that are worth mentioning. One thing is it uses a water source that used to be considered unusable, and so it was never used. It was groundwater that was too salty to drink, and we couldn't irrigate our farms with it. And so I think one thing that's significant is we're using a source that used to be considered unusable, and so we're turning it into something that is very precious to Brownsville and to our partners, Los Fresnos and Indian Lake and Valley Mud and the Port of Brownsville. So I think that's one thing that's significant. The other thing it does is we rely less on a single source. As we mentioned before, up until like the late 1990s or before, shortly after 2000, Brownsville only had one source of water supply, and that was the Rio Grande. And so what this does is it diversifies our water source, and it's a drought-tolerant source that in case we do get in the situation where we were before, we have an alternate water supply, and that strengthens, I think, the community as a whole. The other thing that would be worth mentioning is SRWA, I mentioned, was a 7.5 million gallon per day facility, treatment facility, using state-of-the-art technology. Well, this facility and this type of treatment that we're using, we used to be, up until about 2 years ago, we were the largest inland brackish water RO facility, which was one of the first. Now, since then, El Paso has come down. They've looked at our plant. They're doing similar things, and they started operation 2 years ago, and they're now the biggest. But
Well, I think it says a lot about SRWA because this plant was used as a model for many different cities who wanted to come and just see the reverse osmosis and how it works and how they can implement it into their own water, like future water plans. So
definitely.
I think it's a super, super great way to teach people about what they have here in the community. I mean, not a lot of people realize there's some really groundbreaking stuff going on in our community right now. So much so that the university brings their students out.
they do. We get quite a few tours throughout the year. We have a lot of engineering students that are interested in the plant. We have ecology students. We had one of the students studied the water that comes out of the plant, and she did her major or her thesis on the discharge of the water through to, I guess it's the reject water is what we call it. But anyway, so we have ecological students, we have engineering students. We even had a couple of students studying on the economical aspect of the plant. So we have those. We had legislature tours, and we have a lot of tours. We have a lot of people interested in coming out to the plant. And of course, we invite people to come by and to contact PUB if they're interested in taking a look at the plant or talking to us about the plant.
Okay, Judy, is there anything else that you would like to mention about the SRWA?
Not really. I guess we covered quite a bit, but thank you for allowing us the time to explain about the plant, I guess do some bragging. We got some bragging rights, and
That's
very proud
true.
of it.
That is true. I would like for all the people in Brownsville to realize that the Southmost Regional Water Authority is a very innovative, very state-of-the-art plant, and it's right here in our neighborhoods. If you would like to have a tour, or if you're interested in finding out more, you can go to our website at brownsvillepub.com, or you can also call Brownsville PUB. And thank you, Judy. I want to say thank you so much for being with us today at Brownsville PUB at Work.
Well, good. I enjoyed it.
Appreciate you coming by. And again, my name's Alicia Warner. This is Brownsville PUB at Work, and we will see you next time.